Good day, everyone. I'm Clarissa Ramos. I'm the wife of the late attorney Benjamin Ramos Jr., a staunch human rights lawyer who was gunned down by motorcycle riding gunmen in November 6, 2018 in Negros Island, Philippines. Attorney Ben was one of the founding members of the National Union of People's Lawyers, or the NUPL, and was also a founding member and executive director of Pagidait sa Kauswagan Development Group, or PDG, a non-profit organization assisting peasant groups in Negros. I started my work with PDG in Negros Island in 1993. I lived with the farmers, and there I saw the chronic issues of landlessness, unjust labor practices, dislocations due to intrusion of big corporate plantations, and repression exacted by the landlords in connivance with the paramilitary and the state forces. I understood their struggles, and this further inspired me to engage in community organizing. For more than 30 years, PDG has significantly contributed to the establishment of empowered and self-reliant communities, actively campaigning for genuine land reform and promoting climate-resilient ecosystems. Because of our dedication to educating the peasants about their rights, threats and intimidation against us further intensified. In June 2020, situation in the Philippines worsened with the passage of the anti-terror law. Like the rest of the land defenders, I was red tagged and placed in posters accusing me of being a terrorist. The threats on my life and the status of my husband's unresolved case pressed me to seek for political asylum here in Belgium. In 2021, I joined the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, or ICHRP. ICHRP is a global network of organizations dedicated to the struggle for human rights and democracy in the Philippines. I helped set up the ICHRP Europe chapter then and stayed on until today to carry out the coordination works.
Hello, I am Angelo V. Suarez, an artist and a volunteer for Union ng mga Manggagawa sa Agrikultura or UMA. And I'm one of the co-founders of Sama-samang Artista para sa Kilusang Agrario or SAKA, which is a loose collective of artists pushing for genuine agrarian reform.
Hello, I'm Donna Miranda, also a volunteer of the Union ng Manggagawa sa Agrikultura. I am a choreographer and also a co-founder of Sama-sama Artista para sa Kilusang Agrario.
Hi, I am Ilang-Ilang Quijano. I started out as a campus journalist with College Editors Guild of the Philippines. That was more than 20 years ago. And since then, went to co-found some of what we know as alternative media or progressive media in the Philippines, such as Pinoy Weekly and Alter Media. I was with alternative media for quite some time. And during that time, I was able to cover the stories of many marginalized sectors, including peasants and fisher folk and other rural people. Right now, I am with Pan Asia Pacific, one of the regional centers of Pesticide Action Network International. So PAN-AP works, of course, with Pan International to try to eliminate the harms of pesticides on human health and environment. But also, we work on land rights issues. We work on food sovereignty, and we work on empowering our partners all over the region to practice people-led agroecology.
Hi, I'm Charlene Tan from Good Food Community, and I'm here to share some thoughts about food justice and food sovereignty in solidarity with our work with ALPAS.
Hi everyone, I'm Mitzi Jonelle Tan, a full-time climate justice activist from Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, or YACAP. YACAP is an alliance of young individuals and youth organizations that have 5 points of unity, namely climate justice, urgency of climate action, youth-led collective action, defense of environmental defenders, and system change.
Well, in the Philippine context, food sovereignty or the right of the people to determine their own food systems has to take into account the semi-colonial and semi-feudal nature of its economy, the backward, small-scale and fragmented nature of farming, and neoliberal policies that have kept Philippine agriculture import-dependent and export-oriented. It means that food sovereignty or food justice cannot be achieved without basic socioeconomic reforms and thinking about what genuine rural development means.
Well, I think food justice and food sovereignty simply come together. No? You can't have sovereignty without justice. So in the Philippines, much of agricultural lands are monopolized by big landlords, compradors, and the imperialists that they are beholden to. And this leaves the farmers who make up the majority of our population with little to no control of much of agricultural lands. So the mere fact that control of these lands is in the hands of the 1% means there is no food justice in the Philippines. And until there is justice, in the sense that farmers and workers, but primarily farmers, have control of this land, then there can be no sovereignty for them. No? To have food sovereignty means that these farmers, again, the democratic majority of the population, the farmers have the say on what gets grown on the land that they have dominion over. And this entails being able to prioritize food staples that their immediate communities and families need instead of the cash crops that corporations would rather they plant.
Food justice is being able to have access and control over the things that you need to produce food, and that is land, the most basic thing of all. And when you have access to the modes of production to produce food, of course, you will have the freedom to control how to exploit those resources to your advantage and to the development of of the interest of the democratic majority that is made up of farmers.
We find that the Philippine context is dominated by the corporate food system. Our generation practically grew up with processed food. We don't really know what real fresh food tastes like. And this is affecting our health. Many of us suffer from a physical burden of disease, are likely to die from all sorts of diseases that are caused by lifestyle and diet issues. So this can be directly traced to the dominance of the corporate food system and a complete disconnect from where our food comes from and how it's grown. We also inherit the lack of agrarian reform. So we can't have food justice without it, and when our farmers have no control over their resources. Even to this day, land is continually being seized by corporations and converted into subdivisions. And unfortunately, we see it amongst our government leaders who are in bed with corporate interests.
It's very clear to us that the reason behind the climate crisis is the imperialist, profit-oriented system that prioritizes the greed of the ruling class over the well-being of majority of people and quite literally the physical limits of the planet. Food justice and food sovereignty is so important for a country like the Philippines that is currently very food insecure despite being an agricultural and archipelagic country. This means that we are very rich in resources, and yet our small farmers and small fisherfolk are among the poorest in our society, and majority of people in the Philippines don't have access to healthy and nutritious food. Our country is also one of the most climate vulnerable in the world, despite contributing so little to the climate crisis, and we're already seeing how typhoons and heat waves and other impacts of the climate crisis are affecting our food security and making the lives of our peasants, or our small farmers and small fisherfolk and majority of Filipinos harder. We know that this is going to keep getting worse, and so we need to ensure that we're best prepared for this. But how do we do that when the main problem that is causing our food insecurity is that majority of land in the Philippines is held by landlords? Think back to the medieval times of Europe when there were landlords and serfs, and they're planting by hand. That's what farming here looks like, except we now also have large monocrop plantations with cash crops meant for export to the imperialist countries, which means we're not even planting food that Filipinos can eat. This is bananas, coconuts, pineapples, sugar, and more. And so the next time you see these fruits or these products, remember our farmers and their resistance that you have to join.
When you say food sovereignty, it is about how you give the farmers, the food producers, the right to decide which food to produce. How to produce it by using farm practices that are ecologically sound and sustainable. Food sovereignty actually addresses hunger of both the farmers and the consumers. Food justice, on the other hand, means putting the farmers in the heart of the system, ensuring that they have full control over the land that they till and its resources. They get fair remunerations on their labor, and they get fair pricing of their local produce. It also means allowing them to fully exercise their right to organize and form associations and become part of the policy and decision-making frameworks. For me, sustainable food system means supporting the farming systems that are viable, particularly for the small-scale farmers. Sustainable food system is not about just producing volume of agricultural products using chemical farming to make greater profits. These corporate-driven policies, these big agribusiness companies, and their wide use of genetically modified crops are not only destroying the global ecosystems, but are also disempowering our farmers and threatening our very own existence. Our food system becomes sustainable when our farmers, our food producers, are the prime movers in our agricultural system. That means they have full control of their traditional seeds and able to preserve them. That means the farmers are the breeders who are able to develop resilient crops suited to their local condition. It also means farmers have the capacity to process food, so nothing is wasted and people are able to enjoy diverse food products.
We want all Filipinos to be fed, where there's a relationship between farmers and eaters, where land goes to the tillers, where human rights are respected, and where there's a real agroecological movement, which is science, a relationship with the land, with each other, and a movement for justice, where each of us can have access to the resources to grow our own food and to be able to feed each other.
This will entail genuine agrarian reform, and that means every farmer who can till the land should have land. It's as simple as that. And when you give farmers dominion over the land that they till, this allows them to prioritize food that they and their families actually need. And when they are able to provide for their families, that means they are also in a position to provide for their immediate communities and the communities beyond theirs. No? What this allows them to do is feed the entire country. And we'd rather be feeding our country than those who plunder our resources or who take away our lands or those who underpay agricultural workers.
a sustainable food system would be a country without 50.9 million severely and moderately hungry people. That's almost half of the population. So, simply put, a sustainable food system is a country where no one experiences hunger and no children and pregnant women die of preventable deaths just because they are undernourished.
You see, having a sustainable food system means having food justice and food sovereignty. And that will only happen if we give land back to the tillers, to the farmers, those who are actually working on the land. It means developing resilient agricultural practices and supporting and strengthening our existing traditional and sustainable knowledge of agriculture, which in turn protects biodiversity. And you're seeing that in Lupang Ramos, because the small farmers have taken back their land, they are now planting crops that are in line with the seasons, that are in line with what's healthy and will healthy for their community first and foremost, but also ensuring that the soil's fertility continues and it doesn't affect the biodiversity of the land, because they know that land is life, and so that they need to take care of the planet and the environment and the land, because it's what gives them sustenance. We're also seeing this through grassroots movements and institutions like Masipag, where they encourage farmers to save and exchange seeds, which is so essential for maintaining agricultural biodiversity and adaptability in the face of climate change. And surprise, surprise, large-scale agribusinesses are not in favor of this.
Food prices are expensive. In a year, the price of rice would have gone up and down 3 or 4 times. There is no steady supply for nutritious vegetables. There is no steady supply for protein. There's no steady supply for all the food staples that every Filipino family needs. Organizations have responded by uniting and pushing the agenda and demanding for their rights. Other organizations and other peasant movements in the countryside have put up bungkalans and food gardens, and yet even those political acts to ensure access to food and to ensure access to productive resources are still met with state repression and violence. And so we must continue to strengthen the struggle, strengthen our unities, and continually talk about the issues in food insecurity that every Filipino face.
So we've seen that when farmers have control over their land, we work with smallholder organic farmers. They will opt for sustainable ways of food production. And we see that they have food to eat, they are safe from toxicities, and they tend to protect their water resources. So in many cases, a lot of our farmers know how to grow organically, they know how to do it well, do it right, but there aren't options for them. There are no marketing partners. The dominant food system traps them in ways where they have no choice but to play the same monoculture industrial game of, borrowing capital for high yielding varieties or and pesticides and, these ways of production. And when it comes to actually selling the product, they are at the mercy of whatever price middlemen are willing to pay. So it's not a sustainable way of being, and neither is it healthy for them in the long run, but many of them have no choice. With food today, food tomorrow, we've seen that the urban poor, without land, it's really hard to grow their own food. So during the pandemic, they did try to grow in pots and small areas. Many of them continue to do so, but the land, is always contested, and it's very vulnerable to floods, to movement, other people settling there, or development aggression, them being displaced. So it's very challenging to continue to grow their own food. We've seen that many are products of organized abandonment, so an organized neglect in terms of the lack of infrastructure, support services, access to seeds. When we started this work, just wanting to provide a solidarity market for our farmers, we thought, how hard could it be? But then when we endeavored to be, co-producers, when we promised to just buy what they have for as long as they grow organically, we saw that this wasn't the end of their problems, that it was just the beginning. They didn't have any of these support services, access to capital, microloans, technology, or extension support. So we had to do a lot of this ourselves. And of course, a small group can only do so much. So we really need the government to put political will into supporting our smallholder farmers. During the pandemic, we also saw a lot of active state repression and silencing of landless farmers and many of the urban poor. So it almost seems that, it was very difficult to even extend a sense of solidarity and unity when you would be, when you're actively afraid of being considered a terrorist for some reason. So these are kind of the issues that we face as we work with marginalized folks.
At the heart of the Filipino struggle for food justice is the struggle for land. And that is something that the rest of the world could learn from. No organic kind of eating, no plant-based diet, no food-saving mechanisms, no food sharing mechanisms will solve and bring about food justice until the means to produce food is within the control of the largest majority and the most exploited class in a country. And a lot of countries are facing hunger. A lot of people, not just in the global south, but also in the global north, are experiencing involuntary hunger and poverty. And something we can learn from the Filipino struggle is the understanding of what is the root cause of food injustice, what is the root cause of hunger, and persevering and pushing that agenda, that the only solution to food injustice and the only path towards food sovereignty is winning the struggle over land.
To add to that, I think it's important to always locate our aspirations for food sovereignty and food justice within class struggle. People are hungry because there is another class taking away land from the class of the peasantry.
So as young climate activists, we see the importance of standing with the peasant sector. We join protests and hold community immersions with our small farmers and small fisher folk in order to learn from their campaigns and their struggles and to exchange knowledge on climate justice in order to strengthen our collective resistance against the system that is destroying people and planet. Considering that we're in an environmental crisis, you would think that our environmental defenders are protected and listened to and prioritized, but instead the Philippines is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for environmental defenders and activists, and that includes our land defenders and our ocean defenders. Climate justice is land justice, it's ocean justice. If we want to be able to adapt to the climate crisis and minimize the impacts of the disasters, we need to fight for genuine agrarian reform. And this fight is not limited to us here in the Philippines. You see, what's happening here is happening across the world, and the multiple crises that we are facing are all caused by the imperialist system, and so we must change the system. We must bring down imperialism. And how do we do that? We take their power. And where do they get their power from? From land and ocean and nature, our resources, our people and your people. And so we must take it back. We must exchange knowledge on resistance and embrace diversity of our tactics that are in front of us, and realize that where there is oppression, there you'll find the greatest voices of resistance. The fight of our defenders is so fierce and strong, but also creative and nourishing. Some of their best practices are pagbubungkal, which means to literally just take up space and farm. They accept, embrace, and call on everyone to join the struggle. And I think that's such a crucial lesson to learn, that no one is born an activist, and so we must embrace everyone and encourage everyone to join the movement. There's so much to learn from the hope, the creativity, the resilience of our environmental defenders, of our small farmers, of our peasant sector.
I think they can learn from our stamina. Our people have never stopped fighting. They've fought through years of colonial rule. They continue to fight now against imperialism. And food is central to our well-being, our culture, our life. Land is central to our well-being, our culture, and our life. And so continuing to keep that alive, that idea that land belongs to those who farm it, and we all deserve to be fed and to be protected.
So we must support the peasant movement in the Philippines, of course, strengthen the global food sovereignty movement by standing in solidarity with our farmers in whatever way possible. So this is by holding events, like what you're doing right now, going to the Philippines to integrate in communities, and raising our voices whenever a farmer is killed, abducted, or arrested. Pan-Asia Pacific and other organizations such as the People's Coalition for Food Sovereignty is currently holding the Global People's Caravan for Food, Land, and Climate Justice. The goal of the caravan is to unite rural peoples and other advocates towards common demands around food, land, and climate justice. So I encourage you all to go visit our website, ourfoodsystems.org. We have a petition there regarding the demands of rural peoples to the upcoming COP28. These are the demands of rural peoples for climate justice. And also, we have there a primer, which we hope that you can discuss amongst yourselves, because it would describe our analysis of why the global food crisis is escalating and what we can do to shift the power and for the future of a future free from hunger, dispossession, and destruction. So thank you so much for listening, and congratulations to your event.